Okay, so dear colleagues, welcome back to the second day of our CHANSE kickoff conference. I hope you have had an opportunity meanwhile to discover a bit Tallinn's nightlife. Well, as you probably have noticed, at this time of the year, the days are very long here and the nights are really bright, so that it makes not much sense to go to sleep very early, so that if you didn't do it yesterday, you could do it today. So, and on Fridays also, the night is also more lively. So it's a pleasure to introduce the first panel session of today. It's called Digital Humanities as Collaboration with Different Actors, Disciplines, and Stakeholders. The moderator of the section is Maciej Maryl from the Institute of Literary Research of the Polish Academy of Science, who will moderate and introduce the other panelists. So Maciej, the floor is yours.
Daniel, and hello everyone. I know it's pretty early and we're grateful that you're here. So we'll try to warm you up before the whole day of work. And the idea for this panel stemmed from the question how we can try to involve the humanities a bit more in our work. And one context for it would be the disciplinary breakdown of the calls funded in this round. And if we can have a slide now, because we have just one slide for this panel, just to show you. And I think some of you know it already. So this is the slide of the disciplines funded in the call, and yeah, my panelists are just picking here, and you can see that basically we don't see many representatives of the humanities disciplines, and we guess this is one of the factors why we were invited here to think about changing this, and not only for the sake of involving more disciplines, but also to show you how we can form meaningful contributions from the humanities. And one way to do it is through something which is called digital humanities. And this will be precisely the topic of today's session. Our idea is to explore this notion of digital humanities being a nice vehicle for inter-transdisciplinary collaboration with my great guests I'm just about to introduce to you. And the idea here is to look at this issue from different disciplines. So we have our guests representing different branches of digital humanities, different branches of, let's say, research or types of research. So first of all, we have Agiatis Benardou, who's the director of DARIAH. DARIAH is a digital infrastructure for arts and humanities, and Agiatis is also working in the digital curation unit in Athens. So this would be the perspective we will have for looking at the issue from the side of infrastructure or supporting research or building tools and services that can support it. Then we have Eveline Wandl-Vogt, who works both in Austrian Academy of Sciences, but also in she's the foundress of two Ars Electronica research institutes, namely Knowledge for Humanity and Exploration Space at the Austrian Academy of Sciences. And here with Eveline we have this, let's say, we'll look more closely to cooperation with arts and how we can involve STEAM disciplines into in our work. And finally, we have Jamie Davies, who gives us just yet another discipline here, and there's a discipline to the perspective here, because Jamie is a senior international partnerships and engagement manager and at HRRC. You UKRI, the funding agency which you're really familiar with here, and he was involved in development of CHANSE framework, but also other calls he'll be discussing today. But we really wanted to have a funder's perspective in the room, so we can just look from those three angles at how we can work with the humanities. Okay, so we begin, and also we want to hear from you. So, you know, please be aware that we will be also trying to ask you some questions, and after each round we will try to reach out to you. And I know it's early, but, you know, perhaps and hopefully we will generate some questions from the audience. So I would like to begin with, actually, I mean, we're talking now about this issue in a really general and, let's say, abstract manner. Like, there's some humanities, some digital humanities, and we have to somehow integrate it. So we wanted to actually contextualize it with actual examples. So my first question to the panelists, and starting with Agiatis, will be to ask about the actual best practice example of dialogue, interdisciplinary dialogue fostered by the humanities, or how the digital humanities became this kind of glue for the project, or contributed to the project from your perspective.
Well, my sound is okay, I hope. Good morning, Maciej, and good morning, everyone. Thank you to the organizers. It's a bit intimidating sitting here, you know, with all the lights on our faces. So yes, please, let's make this a bit more comfortable and interactive. I can't really see the slide, but it doesn't take me by surprise that the arts and humanities are not that present in it. Well, I can speak from various perspectives, both as DARIAH director and as a researcher. As a researcher, you know, an active DH researcher seeking funding from different bodies for all sorts of projects or initiatives. Now, DARIAH is, a few words about DARIAH for those of you that have not heard of it or are not as familiar with it. It stands for Digital Research Infrastructure for the Arts and Humanities. It's a federated infrastructure comprising of national nodes, Poland, Germany, Greece, where I come from. Hopefully at some point the UK will be part of it. And what we try to do, just in a nutshell, is support and encourage digital research in the digital arts and humanities across Europe throughout the research life cycle. So we're not a funding body per se, but we do have some funding activities, of course. And one thing I have to say about DARIAH is that it is by definition, it fosters by definition collaboration between STEM and GLAMS. It's very inclusive. So one thing I would like to discuss as an example of this collaboration that you questioned in a way, Maciej, is the theme call that we release as DARIAH every couple of years. The latest one is on workflows. You know, the term comes up quite frequently lately from the Commission. It's, you know, it's sort of a sexy term as of late. So the theme, our theme call was on workflows as an example of different kinds of disciplines and different kinds of processes that these disciplines have to employ at different stages and in terms of answering different questions and solving different problems. So just a few workflows that we works on, a few examples of work on workflows that we are supporting in this round is like OCR publication pipelines for textual heritage, mobile GIS workflow for archaeology and archaeological prospection, open bibliodata workflows. So these could be definitely, you know, digital humanities projects. And even before that, in our previous call, which was of course heavily influenced and inspired by COVID, we did fund projects pertaining to the arts. So aesthetic resilience of contemporary music facing the pandemic crisis, or for example, making the pandemic understandable using public high-resolution screens, so supporting arts installations. Some of them were showcased in our last annual event in Athens, Greece last summer, around these days last summer. Another example from the DARIAH perspective is the data space workflow we are working on for collections as data, cultural collections as research data, alongside Europeana in their project on the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage. But one thing I would like to stress, and this is my final sort of comment here, is that DARIAH is effectively a bottom-up organization. So, as you know very well, our working groups, some of them are funded for outreach and meetings and networking. Our working groups are real-life examples of the bottom-up work, the grassroots work carried out, which is completely interdisciplinary and does bring in, GLAMS and STEM in the heart of them. Many of them are very successful, like the Smart Cities one, Smart Cities and Culture one, Geodata, Women Writers in History, all of them employing digital methods, but at the heart of them, they're hugely part of the humanities and the arts.
And do you think, just for the sake for the audience to grasp it better, in one of those projects, can you if you're familiar with any, just kind of grasp these dynamics between disciplines? So, like, there's humanities and, I don't know, with smart cities, for instance, what are the, let's say, what's the interaction? What are the other disciplines that kind of come together in this?
Oh, I mean, of course. There you can. When you say interaction between disciplines, you mean in humanities disciplines, right?
The humanities or beyond?
Well, within the humanities, I mean, in that particular working group, you would find architects, you would find, IT people working in them, you'd find people working on public history because there's a lot of crowdsourcing of content. You'd find, graphic designers and so yes, in the heart of them, they're disciplinary within and beyond the humanities, not just in the digital domain, but also in the traditional, conventional, humanistic kind of sense.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really interesting notion of having those different aspects covered by the humanities and other disciplines, which brings us a little bit to Eveline, and I would like to hear a bit more about your transdisciplinary collaboration within Ars Electronica, where you actually, it's like a really creative space with the arts, but also with kind of new media and other, let's say, non-humanities disciplines as well.
Thank you very much as well for having me. It's a pleasure to discuss with you about this interdisciplinary approach and transdisciplinary approach, maybe even how I call it antidisciplinary approach. I'm very much into an action-driven approach of how to make happen humanities knowledge or knowledge at all into applications and make this world a better place. So that's the overall why I do things and how I try to address them. A lot of things that Agiatis already mentioned are part of my mission and my work. I started within DARIAH as well, related to digital humanities. I was competence center chair for infrastructure, so I'm very much into this technical part. Realized by then that it is crucial that people work much more together and that the technical part is not the most difficult one for us to work with. So then I started to get further in my explanation and in my journey, funded exploration space where we looked into a variety of methods and tried to find these methods from different areas and disciplines, but as well not disciplines, but rather, let's say, from business companies, because we are in a transformation process. So sometimes other stakeholders, other actors are much further in the process already. That's what I've learned from the journey. And the other part why I was looking very much into the arts was because artists are much more experimental. They have much more freedom. They have less security, but more freedom to play around. And this playing freedom offers the opportunity to get a step further in the process of knowledge creation and co-create knowledge. So starting to do that all and putting bits and pieces together, I funded as Electronica Research Institute Knowledge for Humanity. As I've mentioned, it is about accelerating knowledge into action, which is quite important and which is what I would like to see much more in our calls and as well in our projects. And the other thing is to make happen something, to learn together. So that is what we are trying to do in our Electronica Research Institute. It offers me the opportunity to be more on this, let's say, playful technology space on the one hand as well. It offers the opportunity to be more together with artists and offer them rewards. For them, it might not be a reward to work with me on a science paper, but for them, it's a reward to work on a worldwide known festival. So it is quite important to understand what are the rewards for certain communities, for certain players, for certain actors, to be part of an ecosystem that is created for a certain purpose. And that's what we call art-driven innovation. So it is getting its values, its challenges from the Sustainable Development Goals that we are breaking down to the Good Life Goals. The Good Life Goals are related to what I as a person can do to make this world a better place, and then they are mapped to the Sustainable Development Goals. We are trying to work definitely with emergent technologies, and from there we are as well adding art, artistic thinking, art and design, methods from the arts, on the one hand for, let's say, creating art-driven ideas for innovation, but as well to empower people via art and make use of this healing process that the arts offer to people. So it is a self-reflection, and it is something that is a communication process and an awareness. And what I've mentioned before is as well, it's related to activism. I definitely would like and try to work towards the humanities being part much more, as they have been part of the process of changing the world to a better place.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, I really like this idea of knowledge into action, right? This the do you have any example of the whatever project or this or whatever artistic practice that kind of embraces this idea and actually puts the knowledge into action? Yeah.
So what probably makes a good fit to what Agiatis said before is we funded an association which is called Urbanitarian. Mm-hmm. In this framework, we are developing and applying the method justhood, which is coming from trust and justice and neighborhood, and it is about building your future. Actually, we are working with master plans. We are working with participatory futures, as it is called, to commonly co-create a vision and envision your future space, and that's what we are doing together. And there, for sure, the culture, the dimension of culture, the dimension of living together, the dimension of tools and skills that are coming from the humanities are quite obviously necessary. So there is this part from, let's say, looking back into the tradition, into the culture, into languages, and bridging it and then getting forward.
Yeah, and one more thing, because I remember also this project that kind of, I think, stemmed from this milieu, the visualization of COVID, right? COVID-19, yeah. So it was also kind of embracing data technologies and kind of humanities reflection and visualization. So I wonder if in this context also how you can kind of picture it as, again, this sort of arts and humanities contribution.
Yeah. For sure. I didn't Yeah, I wanted to say it, I forgot about it. It was actually an answer as well to a call from DARIAH, but we had a pre-work ongoing before, so we started that collaboration in the beginning actually of COVID in 2020. I didn't know both of the guys I was working with by then. One of them is from a French company, NAMSO, which is a data science company. The other one is a researcher that did his PhD on visualization, Dario Rodriguero, who is now a professor in Groningen. And we started to do this collaboration where I said, well, actually, I remember that he did this kind of visualizations of network analysis and visualizations, and wow. And the other one, I thought, was quite doing this data science where we are looking into the ethics of people. And what I like quite a lot about this addressing of data science is if we are looking into the ethics of people and where they are coming from, we are working with the phoneme and the surname of people, and of this combination and related to the etymology, we are addressing it. And this as well puts etymology, which is really something where we are quite thinking strangely about, put it like that, and thinking it has no application at all, into a field where it starts to get quite relevant. And you can do quite a lot of meaningful studies. And what we were doing by then was working together, trying to analyze about 600,000 sources that are openly available. So kind of we are building on all what Agiatis says. We are simply counting that these infrastructures are working, and if they don't, we are evaluating them and feeding back what does not work. And then we are working with these open science tools, making them accessible, trying to figure out with NLP practices what are the key topics that we are working on, or that are people working on in this, and what are how are the authors connected to each other in a network, and we visualize that. First we did 2 separated visualizations in the first year of our Electronica Festival, and in the second year we tried to merge it to an immersive visualization on a big 3D screen, which allowed us to zoom in and do kind of game-alike, get into the topic, and make use of that. And we definitely won several prizes on the one hand with this visualization, and on the other hand it was funded by DARIAH gratefully.
Yeah, thanks. And I also think this is like a great contribution from arts, that you can actually present those results, and in this case, in this kind of interactive visualization, and we kind of people get immersed and engaged with it. So you get like a biggest, let's say, bigger impact actually, and different kind of experience of the results actually of this project. Okay, so we had on one hand the perspective of researchers and research infrastructure. We spoke about workflows for interdisciplinary work. We spoke about the, let's say, art intervention and putting knowledge into action. And now how to actually support this kind of work. So we are talking, and now we are asking Jamie to give us like this kind of perspective of the funder on those issues, how we actually we or you actually can stimulate this this sort of work and digital humanities or in general this interdisciplinary enterprises. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So I think from a funder's perspective, I will address those figures on the screen, but I want to give another example first. So one of the programs I'm most proud of from AHRC is a collaboration with Ireland, so the Irish Research Council. And between 2019 and next year, we've got a 4-year program with them looking at UK-Irish collaboration in the digital humanities. And it's over €7 million in total. It's a fantastic investment. And when we set out doing this in 2019, we brought them together just before the COVID outbreak. We had a Dublin workshop with about 80 academics, 40 from the UK, 40 from Ireland. And we purposefully did not define digital humanities. We left that open for the community to interpret as they wish. It had the proposals had to fall within the remit of AHRC, so within the arts humanities, and they had to use digital methodologies, and they had to address particular challenges, or they had to address particular sub-themes which were challenges, effectively. And we funded 12 networking awards, so small one-year awards, and 11 research grants, so larger three-year ones, which finish next year. I just want to give you a flavour of some of those awards, because I think they perfectly illustrate, I think, what I'd like to continue seeing in this space. So one of the research grants awards that is active at the moment is it's called Typhoid, Cockles and Terrorism, and is looking at typhoid in Dublin. And the UK academic, lead academic, is Dr. Samantha van der Slot, part of the Oxford Vaccine Group. And you may remember that name from the vaccine relating to COVID. And then her Irish co-PI, is Dr. Klaas Kirchhoff from the University College Dublin. And over 3 years, what they're doing is they are aiming to explore the connection between imperial and revolutionary public health politics in 20th century Dublin, using a mix of historical and digital humanities methods to analyze and digitize historical disease, medical correspondence, cultural ephemera, infrastructural records, and meteorological data to understand why British bacteriological and sanitary interventions proved impractical in Dublin and how they were perceived by local populations. And there's going to be an exhibition in Dublin City Library or also the Royal College of Physicians in Ireland over the course of the coming months and next year. Another example I want to just, again, show you or tell you about is another one of these research grants, and it's called Tackling Online Hate in Football. And it's about tracing and combating online hate in football and then using sort of digital methodologies to understand or to look at social media in terms of hate speech and cultural gatekeeping. And in particular, they're looking at the European Football Championships, the men's and women's games between 2008 and 2022. Another one is a project, this was a smaller one, this was one of the networking ones, called Make Film History. And it was a collaboration between Kingston School of Art and University College Cork. And they had industry partners, including the BBC Archive, British Film Institute, Irish Film Institute, and Northern Ireland Screen. And it was all about creating digital platform that enables young people to reuse archive material and create new films and create a new generation of young filmmakers. And they were so successful in this that they actually in 2022 they went on to win the International Federation of Television Archives 2021 Archiving Achievement Award for unlocking the value and potential of archives. So again, that's another perspective. The last one I want to mention is, again, another one of the small awards, a networking award. And they came to us with a very, very ambitious aim, saying we want to bring together the leading academics from digital humanities in UK and Ireland to create the first permanent Digital Humanities Association for UK and Ireland, and with about £30,000 on each side to create this. So over the course of the year, they set about doing that. And this year, they actually launched, they've created the association, it is now live, and they just announced recently the formation of community interest groups. So there's a research, software, engineering, and the arts humanities group. All of these groups have UK and Irish leading academics in both of them. Another one is Digital Humanities Climate Coalition. Another one is Digital Correspondence, Trans-Historical Perspectives on Language, Materials, and Corpora. Another one is Multilingual Digital Humanities in the UK and Ireland. And the last one is Protecting the Investigator in Traumatic Research Areas. So again, really, really broad community interest groups there. But the key thing is that we're bringing together, or that association is bringing together UK and Irish researchers to collaborate and demonstrate the added value of international collaboration. So on the screen then, not relating to CHANSE then, because I know you're probably going to ask me this as a follow-up question. So for AHRC, and for this call, the UK was a single entity. It was the UK Research Innovation. So I was leading it for AHRC, and my colleague Emily for the Economic Social Research Council. So we were actually entering CHANSE as one single entity. For AHRC, obviously, we're mindful and conscious throughout, and looking at the data for the outline stage and full stage to make sure there were sufficient projects that we could fund from our perspective. When you look at the classifications here, the challenge is what primary classification is used in proposals. What do you as an academic put as your primary classification, or what four do you tick as your classification options? The other choice for funders is what classifications do we use? Do we follow the European Commission sort of classifications? Do we follow OECD? Do we follow each of our individual agencies' approaches to definitions? So I think from AHRC's perspective, the outcome of CHANSE was actually much better. Being honest now, was much better than we expected. Because you heard in terms of there was a lot more social sciences applications if you looked at the first choice, the sort of primary classifications. But overall, and actually we can see from the projects represented here today and yesterday, is out of the 19 projects that the UK funded, 10 were social sciences led, and 9 were arts and humanities. So we couldn't have asked for a better outcome in terms of that split. And obviously that's just, all those projects are interdisciplinary. That is a sort of an artificial sort of how we define that from a funder's perspective. And I'm sure the projects would disagree how we'd label them potentially. But the key thing for CHANSE was that they were interdisciplinary. And that's why I think at the end of the day, I wouldn't read too much into those data. And you'll hear how successful CHANSE has been over the past 2 days.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yes, that's a really great perspective and comparison actually with those. And thank you for the examples. So we'll be discussing still like the challenges actually, because this is also like the big issue. But before we do that, it would be really great to hear also from you if you have already some questions concerning the examples we presented, or perhaps you could share. Other examples of successful collaboration with the humanities, perhaps already in the context of this call, of this funding, perhaps of the existing projects, or any others. So we would like to hear from you to make this a bit of a kind of joint discussion. Yes, please. And if you could just introduce yourself, thanks.
Hi, I'm Catherine Johnson from the University of Huddersfield, and I'm the project lead on the Public Service Media in the Age of Platforms project. It's just a comment, really, in terms of how we're defining the arts and humanities, because I was looking at the list, and my concern was, is the implication that media and communications is being understood as social science? Because I think that's probably a misunderstanding, and I'd be interested to know, I mean, I'm funded through the AHRC, so Arts and Humanities. I think we put our primary classification as media and communications, and we use a mix of more social science methodologies and more arts and humanities methodologies, and I think a lot of media and comms does that, and also cultural studies, and so in some way I was sort of interested in like how you're using the classifications to unpack what's meant by the arts and humanities, I guess, is if there's a question behind my comment.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I guess the underlying issue is like something what Jamie pointed out, that it's the different kind of, let's say, orders of how we put the disciplines together. And you're right that there's some disciplines have already, like you mentioned, media studies have already kind of really interdisciplinary component into it. So that's definitely right. I don't know if you would like to relate to this.
I just sort of repeat what you're saying, Catherine, that for AHRC, media is one of those areas that does fall within the AHRC remit, but equally there is a bit of overlap with ESRC. So I think when it comes to looking at proposals, again, we're not just looking at what the academic department that PI is sitting in, or what your academic background is. It is looking at the composition of the team overall, the methodologies being used, the broader context and theme, and that's how a decision sort of is come to. And so yeah, you could look at that in a very positive light to say, actually, if you're including media and communications within the arts humanities disciplines, which is what AHRC would say, that is very, very positive to see so many there. But each funder nationally is in a different position with regards to that, yeah?
Yes, just, you know, I mean, the moment we start talking about the arts and humanities, you know there's a problem because, you know, it's such a vast field, the humanities, you know, the humanities on the one hand and the arts on the other, and why do we group them together in the first place has always been a question in my mind. But I would actually like to ask Jamie a question we were discussing just before our session started, and that is, how do you formulate the calls? I mean, what do you take into consideration? How do they come about? You know, now speaking not as, you know, DARIAH director, but as a researcher in Greece who always faces like different kinds of calls and needs to address them in order to get funding. So how does this happen?
Yeah, thank you. Really good question. And I think maybe as funders, we need to be a bit more transparent about that in terms of what happens before call launch. So I gave a hint a minute ago in terms of the island program. So usually there's a workshop, it's either a closed or invited one. And so I think with the island example, both funders chose 40 academics from across those disciplines who were leading in their field, and we brainstormed different aspects and different challenges. It ended up in a report, and that report was used to define the scope of the networking call and the research grants call. Obviously, working on with the CHANSE project and also with HERA and North Face networks, again, you've got multiple funding agencies there with multiple sort of strategic priorities and multiple sort of different communities that they need to factor in. So I think, obviously with CHANSE, because it was an EU-funded project, the framework there we'd already applied, and there was already more of a framework there in terms of the topic itself. If I give an example of the two calls that are live at the moment, the HERA and North Face ones, one on wellbeing, one on crisis, the process of what happened there was that each of the funders sort of had to suggest the theme for the next call. So, and then they had to agree what was the top ranked one. That theme was then decided. Each funder then had to nominate an expert who could be part of a working group. That working group met virtually and in person for both in parallel process for HERA and North Face, because there's two parallel calls. So for HERA, we brought the experts together. I think it was about 10 experts from across that have been chosen from the funders together in Poland last year. And we spent the day going sort of line by line through sort of a first draft of various themes, sub-themes. All of the vocabulary had to be sort of made sure it was understood in different languages, and how people perceive the term epistemological in one country is very different to another country. So we literally spent a day going line by line through this to try and come up with some kind of text that everybody was happy with. And then it goes back to the funders. The funders then have to look at that text and see if they're happy with it and if it reflects their strategic priorities. And then you end up with a text that goes into a pre-announcement or a call launch. So yeah, I'd argue it is an inclusive process in terms of not just the funders involved, but also representative from those academic communities.
Yes, thank you. And of course, current affairs influence the calls as well, like in DARIAH, the COVID-related theme call, or the hate speech one you mentioned, or the digital medicine one, which is another, you know, digital medicine, I mean, even in Greece, is a field, digital medicine, and, you know, in terms of, you know, history and mediation, it's not just, you know, digital medicine as in, you know, hands-on medicine, is a field that's coming up a lot, and it's of more interest lately because of the COVID pandemic.
Before we move forward, do we have any other examples or comments? Maybe also from the funders on the process of creating the call? Okay, if not, we can just move. I think we can now. We can just get rid of this slide. Because now we're moving forward to the issue of how to actually move forward, or challenges and best practices. That's the idea for this round. So I would like to learn, like, once we kind of settled how those collaborations may look like, or the practical examples. So what are the actually key challenges for that. So what are the key challenges for interdisciplinary collaboration involving the humanities or digital humanities, and especially like from your perspective, from your experience actually. So for instance, how you overcome it. So for instance, in DARIAH, I know that you have pretty robust training and advocacy measures to kind of reach out to people, to engage them in this, to learn them how to do this collaboration. So I don't know, maybe this is like something you could tell us about how we approach this issue of engaging people.
Well, DARIAH is very much invested in social sustainability, and this is where training and advocacy come in. So there's one thing that I'd like to mention here, and this, I mean, if I only say one thing today, this is what you should take away, is that digital humanities skills are transferable skills in modern society. Mm-hmm. So they're not standalone skills that you use just to carry out one project or other. Digital humanities skills are invaluable in our society. So yes, we do invest. DARIAH Campus, which is available online, is a platform for learning resources, materials, curricula, and courses. It has been built, it was an executive decision on behalf of DARIAH, of the infrastructure, but the campus has been in the making for years, and it's a bottom-up initiative effectively, because DARIAH, even before DARIAH Campus had started, was involved in various training activities and training initiatives, to name a few. DARIAH Teach, a satellite project, again, building curricula around the digital humanities. Also, other projects in which DARIAH was involved, European projects like the Parthenos, they also built curricula. Elexis, with language training resources, and quite a few others, and also working groups. The working groups I mentioned previously, these bottom-up initiatives, quite a few of them were involved in one way or another with DH training. So DARIAH Campus incorporates all these initiatives and brings them all together in one single platform. The Shape ID toolkit, of course, DARIAH was involved in it as well. You know it very well, Maciej. And may I say here that with DARIAH Campus is very open and inclusive. You don't have to be a member of DARIAH or an organization involved in DARIAH in one way or another to, just ask for your own resources to be included and be made visible and available through the DARIAH Campus.
Maybe you can just tell what kind of resources are there just for the audience?
All sorts of resources, from tools or methods. Any kind of learning resource that comes to mind is there. GIS, I mean, everything, pretty much, things pertaining to immersive technologies, things pertaining to digital lexicography, many diverse, but at the same time, pretty coherent, as I said, in the digital humanities. And different ontologies, conceptual modeling, data modeling resources, workflows.
So it's like a huge kind of knowledge base for people with resources they can follow actually when projecting or building their ideas for research for projects.
Exactly, and it's dynamic. I have to stress that. So I mean, anything that comes up and we think should be included, it's just absolutely there, and it's very structured. You can navigate quite easily. Keywords and all. So it's indexed and everything. So it's not just any other kind of platform. It's a very and it's pretty well used. So we are working on it quite.
And I think
a lot.
in the context of advice or best practice, actually, the workflows you do is also like I mean, as we already mentioned, but I think we can reiterate how important they are, because they're basically the kind of building blocks for the research process, right? With the description of what you can do to achieve certain research goal with digital humanities methods. So with steps ahead and like resources to be used or code to be reused, right?
Exactly, because workflows can be high or low level, and they're replicable. That's the thing. So, I mean, if somebody explains a process to you, you know, step by step, then ideally you can follow it yourself. So workflows have this educational component as well, you know, training component as well. It's not just a matter of documentation. It's a matter of, you know, passing on the torch to people that want to do pretty similar things to yours in the DH domain, and you want to, it's a set of best practices in that sense. Yes, you're very, very right.
Yeah. Thanks.
But just before I finish, in terms of advocacy, that because you tackled this point as well, the SHOC clusters, the social sciences, humanities, open cloud. DARIAH is very much involved with that. The president of the board of directors, my colleague Toma Tasovac, he's a chair of the SHOC governing board, and effectively our role there, or what we'd like to see there happening, is bridge any sort of gap between infrastructures on the one hand and domain-specific initiatives on the other. So, you know, it sounds like a very top-down approach, but effectively it's not. You know, it's trying to, you know, bridge exactly that gap.
Yeah, so we can explain to the audience that there's the European Open Science Cloud, EEST, which is actually divided into clusters, so which are built from infrastructures from different I would say areas, domains specific, and one of those domains is social sciences and humanities, and there's DARIAH, but there are other infrastructure for social sciences like CESDA, for instance. There's Claring for language, different infrastructure like working together to kind of share knowledge and resources and yeah, probably one of the big takeaways also from this discussion is that you can actually reach out to those research infrastructures and use their potential or their tools and collaborate, or resources like which are openly available, like in DARIAH's case. And how does it look with the arts then? So we discussed how we support the research in arts and humanities with the digital methods, but when you engage in your work with artists, for instance, what would be the main obstacle you kind of, or set of obstacles you can think of, and how to kind of overcome them if you have people from so different, let's say, disciplines or walks of life in one room, and they need to generate one coherent idea?
Well, the main obstacle I face is probably that we do have not really open organizations, put it like that, neither from the funding schemes that as I recognize, nor from the organizational framework, and that then it's very hard, for example, to work together with an artist that is not having a degree, not having a certain degree or a level of degrees, or if they are, let's say, in a funding scheme, they very often get very few funding, so they are underfunded for what they are doing in the process of research, unless they are kind of in a PhD studies or whatever. So this is a tricky thing. So artists are often similar to citizen scientists. So as well, then you have to discuss the whole thing about what are the rights, what are certainly the rights, what are the intellectual property rights, and so on. So this is one other obstacle that I'm facing if I'm working especially with artists. And as I've mentioned before, the rewards. That's quite necessary to understand that for artists, a festival participation, for example, is something which is of high relevance, especially if it is something which is of a meaningful festival. And for a researcher, maybe it is just to say science dissemination, and it's on very low level. And actually both is wrong. I
Why
consider.
is that so?
But it's really it's causing troubles because usually then I try to do everything, or I have somebody in place for everything, and that's not what a project should do because it's just too much work, which is not seen or visible in the funding scheme of the project.
Yeah,
That's the critical point.
When I was like putting together one Horizon proposal, the advisor would say, yeah, put in the exhibition, like, and they like it. It's, you know, it's a nice dissemination thing. But so how? Yeah, it's a wrong approach. But how we should kind of approach it, you know, properly? What would you say?
Well, as I tried to figure out a little bit with the project of COVID-19 cartography, what I try to find is people that are passionately into the project anyway, that are kind of doing the work that they are doing. So, for example, if I work with Elia Karsena, who is the owner of the company Namso, then for sure he is interested. If he's doing it, he is anyway interested into the topic. And he himself kind of offers time, and the time are resources. And that's why kind of I do not have to care for his time and his funding. And on the other way, if I'm saying I'm working with a person who is funded already in the framework of doing a PhD on visualization, he is funded in this properly, then I might offer him a use case for this, which is a high-level use case, and try to bring things together. So the main thing might be to bring things together and understand what are the needs related to rewards of certain people, and then figure out how can we get each of us a step further on one hand in our own process, and on the other hand all together on a better way. But it takes time, and that's a little bit the tricky thing. It takes a little bit more time, and if you're in a tight time corset, it's impossible. So that's the crucial thing for me.
Okay, thanks. So say we have, like, now we have, let's say, a workflow for that. We have somehow sorted out the idea for cooperation. We submit the proposal, and it comes to Jamie now. and how do you actually deal with it? Like, how you evaluate such a proposal, and how you deal with this issue of different competences, and how, you know, if you have to have this interdisciplinary workflow packed into one project that has to be evaluated.
Yeah, thank you. So I think there's a couple of points here I want to just quickly run through. So I think, and these are things that will help me as a funder and other funders in the room as well. So I think once we get applications in and we sort of identify what their sort of primary classification is and how interdisciplinary it is and what reviewers we need, and also the makeup of the panel as well, to make sure that we've got a panel that's reflective of the breadth of the applications that have been submitted. I think it's making sure as funders we can reach out to the peer review community, to you as academics, to make sure that if available, you can help us in either the review process or the panel process. I think, unfortunately, a lot of calls that I've been involved in recently, that process has happened over the summer, and obviously that's when everyone's on their well-deserved breaks. But in order to keep calls to timescales that you all expect, we have to do that. Unfortunately, we can't drop tools for 3 months and not do that. So I think it's really important that for us as funders, we're able to reach out to the community, and you either accept to be a panel member or a reviewer if you've not submitted a proposal, is really important and would really help us out a lot. And that means we could get those academics who reflect the disciplinary breadth of the proposals here. The other thing, just jumping back a bit, is one of the other complaints is that, I think we talked about this earlier, was why is my funder not involved in the call? Is a common question we get, and I think we talked about Greece as an example there. And again, that is a question. In order to get proposals that are truly European in nature and truly interdisciplinary, we need to get as many funders around the table as possible, and different ministries as well. So I would say that if your ministry or your research agency is not part of HERA or CHANSE or North Face, ask them why not, and put pressure on them to do so. Is really important, and it will help us get more money available to fund more projects, especially if, like with the 2 new calls, the Tri-Crisis and the Wellbeing call at the moment, there's not going to be EU top-up funding for it. So we need, it's too late now because the calls have gone live, but for the next call, so if we're not having EU top-up funding, we need more funders around the table to be able to fund more projects. The other thing is around impact. I know people from the UK will have heard this before, but for HERA and North Face over the past couple of years, we've had amazing knowledge exchange fellows who've done some fantastic work working with the funded projects to really pull out the impact of these interdisciplinary digital projects, or digital, especially some of the digital outputs and impacts as well. And we've got, you'll hear after the break, our fantastic CHANSE knowledge exchange facilitator who will talk a bit more about what's happening for you all over the course of the next couple of years. But I just wanted to give you an example of why this matters for these kinds of projects. So with HERA, our KE fellows did some amazing work over the past year, and this report will be going out, I think, next week or week afterwards, and we'll happily share this to everybody. They've produced a leverage report which demonstrates the added value of these international projects. And over the course of the past 4 HERA calls, 76 million euros has gone to fund 75 humanities-led projects. That has funded a total of 706 scholars, 238 postdocs, 124 PhD students, and those academics have worked with 537 non-academic partners from 22 different sectors. They also looked at the leverage effect, so the additional funding, the follow-on funding of projects, and HERA invested, was it 76 million? They calculate so far at least 106 million pounds, or so euros, has been leveraged as follow-on funding from those 75 projects. So I think that gives an idea of what the CHANSE cohort can do as well over the course of the next 3 years. And the final point I would make is websites. And this is a basic point, but in terms of sustaining the legacy of your fantastic projects, once they're funded, it's a common criticism at the moment, and it's a headache for us as funders, is we really need projects to start thinking about, from the outset, how you're sustaining your websites. Because too often, they disappear, even within a year, sometimes, of the project's funding ending. And I'm sure some of you are going to ask me, well, where's that funding coming from? But I think there's more and more resources, open access mechanisms out there now. There's a fantastic report by the Commission, I think a couple of months ago, looking at sort of depositories. So I think whilst there's no agreed depository at the moment, I think in terms of, I know the Commissioner's got one for outputs, but in terms of archiving project websites, there's still not an agreed position on that. I think you have to work with your institutions and again, your consortium to think about where you can deposit your project website, because for the CHANSE cohort, we don't want to end up in a scenario 3 years from now where all your websites disappear and all your fantastic work gets lost into the ether, apart from those outputs which have been saved onto open access depositories.
Yeah, but I guess also the part of the work of research infrastructures we just mentioned or keep on mentioning here and in this discussion, that, you know, they provide expertise and sometimes also services to actually store your data, your outputs, your website. So I think this is like really good to look at this from this angle of sustainability or sustaining the project's visibility. So before we move on, just one follow-up question to what you said with the proposal, just kind of winding back to the issue of the actual review. So how actually you look at the reviewers when you have the interdisciplinary proposal, when you kind of recruit people? So, you know, just to make sure that, let's say, reviewers would understand, both, let's, or all, the whole proposal, right, rather than just the parts that kind of correspond to their expertise. How does it look from your side?
Yeah, so if we're having, say, 2 reviewers per proposal, obviously we'll want to pick that primary classification to be the first reviewer, and then one of the secondary sort of classifications to be the second reviewer. Obviously, if we're starting this process early on and we're running out of those names for those academics with a secondary reviewer, unfortunately we might have to revert back to sort of one that maybe isn't the second classification, maybe a third one down, maybe, or even, unfortunately, back to the primary one to make sure that there's sufficient reviewers to look at your proposal. So at the end of the day, it comes down to how much time we've got and how available those academics are, the peer review community, to reflect that. But we'll always make sure we're looking at that primary and secondary sort of classifications there to make sure we're reflecting the nuances of the proposals. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand whether you have just this one-level reviewing, or do you have something similar like cost actions do have this reviewing of the reviews? Because I do think that's quite an interesting point, and I am a reviewer of the reviews, and that exactly shows what you say or what you're kind of trying to trigger, that reviewing is so much from your point of view, and it is so hard to understand that you are asked to review it not from your perspective and not from your discipline, but rather understand that it's a meta-reviewing. And if you're looking into the reviews, you definitely have proposals where you have reviewers that say, that's an excellent one and that's a very, very bad one. And that as well helps you, if you have a look at it from a researcher's point of view, to understand, well, I'm not that bad if I get bad reviews. It's kind of a sport, and I have to retry to find the right reviews and the right call. But for sure, it's not what you like it to be.
Yeah, so again, for those of you who aren't familiar with sort of the types of assessment process, you've got an assessment panel, which is where you've got the people who are on the panel who are also doing effectively the reviewing and giving a score. Then you've got the moderation panels, which are the ones that you talked about, where the peer review, those reviews have already come in. There may have also been a PI response, where the academic has responded to the comments. And then the job in the moderation panel of the panel members is to look at those reviews, which probably will have different scores potentially, and also the PI's comments to question and ask, what are the scores that the reviewers have given, are they accurate, and can actually that grade go up or down based on what the PI has said? And in those panels, I think one of the most common comments we get is, well, I can't comment on this because I'm not an academic in that field. But actually, the job of an academic is not to bring their expertise from their own background to assess a proposal. It's that broader skill base of looking at the reviews, looking at the PI comments, and giving a moderated score. So I think there is a difference in the type of approach needed in both. Yeah.
No, thanks. Well, I'd just like to pick something else that you mentioned, and that's the importance of involving junior academics, junior colleagues in projects. I mean, I can't stress that enough. In Greece, we're quite behind, but I'm happy to see this is changing. Not just, PhD students, but also, postgraduate students. I mean, sometimes we have too many chiefs, too little Indians, in projects, and that's wrong on quite a few levels. So I mean, how does the HRC or other funding bodies go about it? This is an interesting question.
Well, I'm really, can you hear me now? Yeah. I'm really pleased to say that AHRC and UKRI is actually dropping the requirement of having to have a PhD for applications, because too long we've realized that doesn't equate always to the best expertise and skills for research proposals. There is obviously disparity across other funders, and I hope that over time that will change, and we won't have to have, that won't be a check that'll have to be done. You can look at not just if they've got a PhD, but what are the skill sets if they haven't got a PhD, and do they meet their quality of experience, postdoctoral standing through experience rather than through doctoral standing. So I'm really glad that we are doing that in the UK.
Thanks, and now we're just turning to the audience. Do you have any questions or examples of difficulties you may have in such interdisciplinary collaboration? Yes, please, Malvina.
Hello, this is Malvina Gabalska from the National Science Center. I would like to add 2 points. Thank you, Jamie, for summarizing our review process. So I would like to mention, because I was coordinating the review process in the CHANSE program, so I was coordinating the review panels. And indeed, it was a big challenge to assess 350 proposals that the community submitted to the call. And unfortunately, we were in very intensive COVID pandemic times. So we organized the whole process online with these 350 proposals. And we divided them in 3 groups so that we have enough time to discuss all proposals really in detail, and we have sufficient discussion on each proposal. So each parallel group was working for 3 days to discuss all these proposals. And I must say that these proposals were truly interdisciplinary, and the more disciplines, the more perspectives from different communities were in one proposals, the longer the discussions, and very heated discussion, I must say, because from each perspective, you can look at the proposal differently. So we really allowed them to discuss these proposals sometimes for more. We were, of course, we had to look at the time, but we still gave panelists freedom to discuss them thoroughly. But still, this was a very demanding process. We involved at the first stage 50 reviewers, 50 panel members, and we always leave this discussion to, as we call it, wisdom of the panel. So we had researchers from many different disciplines, so we had sufficient expertise to discuss very different proposals. So we think it's a very important matter, and we want to organize a fair and transparent process for the proposals. And also to add some numbers to numbers that Jamie gave. So in CHANSE, we received 366 proposals, 350 were eligible for the review process. Then to the next round, we qualified 90 proposals. So the research panel qualified 90 proposals, out of which we fund 26 proposals, which means 627 researchers are funded in the program, 133 national teams overall, and indeed, it's important for us to fund researchers at different stages of the career. So you remember from the call text that we encouraged you to involve researchers at different stages of their career. We also value gender balance, so this was important in the call, and also geographical balance. So we especially invited widening countries because they are not that involved in European funding. That's why these 3 diversity dimensions were important for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, please. Over there.
The lights.
Oh, yes.
Slight lag there, sorry. I wanted to sort of ask a question, I think primarily to Jamie, about the idea of keeping resources persistently after a project ends, because, I mean, websites would be one aspect of it, but so I'll start with my question, which is there a different way we can think about this? Can we maybe talk through different alternatives to what you're proposing? And the context for that question is, as someone who works for a Quartres Seal accredited digital archive, with that hat on, we wouldn't think it would be best practice to archive. And when you say archive, I'm assuming you mean back up and continue to make available over the long term. Something like a website. Websites degrade, they're meant to degrade. And it's actually the content within those websites that we want to preserve. So if there's a different way of maybe thinking about and talking about what it is within those websites you really want to make sure are available in the long term, I think that would be a really fruitful conversation. I would also say, as somebody who works on lots of these projects, just from a practical standpoint, most of these websites are hosted on university servers. These websites almost always sit outside of the in-house sort of collections management system set up by the university, and they're absolute security nightmares. So what ends up happening is the minute the project's over, the IT department starts bugging the PI saying, can we shut it down yet? Can we shut it down yet? Can we shut it down yet? because of the security issues around them. And if a researcher, we all change institutions fairly frequently as well. So as soon as that PI, as soon as that person who might say, oh, do you know what, could you keep it going for another year? As soon as that person is gone, the website's gone. So there are a lot of sort of disconnects along the way when it comes to keeping those profiles out there. So I would just, I see people nodding in the audience, so I'm assuming that I'm not the only one. Maybe we should have a conversation about, what are the significant properties of these websites, and how can we make sure that we're able to keep them persistently in a way that doesn't give our IT departments a heart attack, I guess.
Yeah, thank you very much, Holly. I think that's exactly the kind of conversation we need to have. And again, not jumping ahead to the midterm conference, but again, that could be a good opportunity for the cohort to have this open discussion with the funders and also with the knowledge exchange team to think about what, as you said, what is important to keep on those websites. What if you were somebody in 10 years' time who are looking to find something about your project? What would they need to look for and how would they get it? I think those are the kinds of things we need to ask. Just from, again, experience from some of those early multilateral calls, if you type in the name on Google or another search engine of one of those first funded sort of projects, at the moment you can hardly find anything out about them unless you go through to find an output from one of those projects in terms of maybe a journal article, or which is only covering maybe one part of the project. At the moment, there's no way you get the full overview of the project's outputs. So I think, yeah, it's probably worth the sort of CHANSE Secretariat and the steering group and coordination group and the KEF team to think about that alongside you as the award holders, to have that conversation over the next year. And also bear in mind, when you get your midterm reporting and final reporting, there will be a section in there about digital sustainability. So you will be asked this question at both the mid stage and the final stage. So it's probably worth us having this conversation going forward.
Yeah, it seems like also a perfect place for the digital humanities contribution, actually, to the project. When you look at the life cycle of the project, its data, its services, then, and of course, I totally agree with this notion that not everything has to be, sustained forever. Sometimes you just have to shut it down, but providing that the content is safe and accessible somewhere. Right. I guess we are kind of slowly running out of time, but we have some time for the closing statements. We wanted to actually discuss also the ideas for the great funding calls for interdisciplinary or endeavors, but definitely there's no room for that. But maybe there's anything else you would like to add as a final statement on how that digital humanities can actually contribute to this kind of work and interdisciplinary project now.
In 15 seconds.
In 15 seconds, yeah, 15 seconds each. Right.
No, just to say thank you, and so many ideas, so many good ideas out of this panel, the whole website and the content, and the comment that Holly made, of course, and it got me thinking whether there are ways in terms, at infrastructure level within DARIAH, and this is a discussion I'd like to have with my fellow colleagues in DARIAH and see how we can perhaps we can talk about it with you too, and see how we can, because that's a major problem. Does a project, I mean, when a project ends, it doesn't have to, the whole content around it, does it have to die? That's a thing. So yes, well, thank you.
The last word.
Okay, thank you very much as well for having me. I totally agree. I do think it's definitely on the level of infrastructures and not on researchers level and not on organizational level, especially because the researchers are not that well embedded into the organizations for a long time, or most of them, unfortunately not. So that's a crucial point. I definitely would love to have grant streams that are much more open, for sure, not too much focusing just on researchers at all. At PIS, I would love to have them much more global. And thank you very much.
Cheers, thank you. I think final words for myself would be, over the course of yesterday and today, I think we're seeing how interdisciplinary the CHANSE projects are, how they have got the same potential to reach those impacts that HERA and North Face their projects have had. Hopefully you're seeing the added benefits or the added value of international collaboration, especially now more than ever, I'd say. And I think the two last things are please keep dialogue open with funders in terms of your experience, your successes, your challenges, your recommendations. Funders aren't faceless organizations. We want to have these conversations. So please reach out to us all, yeah?
Yeah, so thank you very much for the contribution. Thank you for the invitations, and we wish you a great conference. Yeah, thanks.